Blazing 420 Radio.
Welcome to the playback.
Welcome to the playback.
The playback.
The playback.
Blazing 420 Radio.
Welcome, everybody. We have a lot of guests, so we're just going to get started right now. We're going to add everybody to the stage. How you doing, Tasha?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, John?
All right.
And how you doing, Austin?
So thank you everyone for joining us again this week. We have such an amazing show for you guys today. We literally have music industry icons and royalty. Like, this is music industry royalty. So you guys sit down, relax. All right, y'all. Welcome Dr. Prescott. She's with Shape of Music LLC Publishing, and she has an honorary doctorate in divinity from Angaza Bible College in Kenya, as well as an honorary doctorate degree in theology, tongue twister, from Elior Evangelical University in Haiti. You guys, welcome.
Make some noise.
Make some noise.
Yeah.
All right.
Hi, everybody. Let's see 1 second. Dr. Westbrooks is actually trying to log on as we speak. He said he's having some kind of problem.
Not a problem.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for coming. So I'm feeling I'm kind of waiting for Dr. Westbrook to show up. All right, well, Dr. Prescott, since we have you here, why don't we talk to you a little bit? Can you just tell us a little bit about, your experience in the industry? I know you've been working with Dr. Westbrook for a really long time. Tell us a little bit about what you guys got going on and where you started.
Okay. Basically, I grew up in the industry, but I didn't really get involved in it until like 2016. I grew up in it with learning the ins and outs of the publishing and clearing samples and whatnot like that. Not so much as, looking for artists like of my own, but just to work with clearance, of it. So it's a pretty cool experience, to grow up in this. And it's something that I want to continue the legend on of my uncle, Dr. Logan Westbrooks. So,
nice.
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
So right now, are you still working with publishing? Are you still in the publishing? So can you, because, there's a lot of aspiring artists, and they may not understand, what publishing is and how that works. Can you give us a little bit of 101 about publishing and how, what you do for artists?
Yes, there are different ways. Like, say, for instance, if we have a song in a catalog and the artist wants to get it cleared, basically what we'll do, we'll go through the due diligence, go through the ins and outs of, like, of course, it's all in percentage and cost. So we'll work all of that out to get all the royalties and everything straightened out. So that way there won't be no backlash of any other music in the archives that we allow to be used.
Nice.
So,
and you have a nice catalog. I see you worked with some music from Nelly. Can you tell us some of the other people that you've worked with as well?
Oh my gosh. Well, actually my did the clearance of all that. Like I said, I was learning during that point in time. But yes, he did a clearance for Nelly. It's Getting Hot in Here. And how that worked, he heard the sample. So he reached out to the young man and flew him out to Los Angeles and recreated the sound himself. So, and he didn't clear samples for many of artists. And he's been in the industry ever since 1972. So he's been in this industry a long time, from Soul Trains, working with so many icons such as the OJs, Isley Brothers, you name it, all the way up into recent artists of today.
Blazing 420 Radio.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
hear you well.
Yeah, definitely.
DJ, Naomi, John?
Hi.
Yeah, we hear you.
Well, number one, it's really a pleasure to meet all of you. It really, really is. And I'm looking forward to working with you and doing some great things. And it's really pleasurable because the men are handsome and the ladies are beautiful. So it's going to be a great working environment.
Thank you. It's
Thank
an
you,
honor,
Dr.
Mr.
Westbrooks.
It's an honor.
Yes, it is an honor and a pleasure to have both you and Dr. Prescott here with us today. In the beginning, I had given a little bit about your background, and I was saying that you and Dr. Prescott are both music industry royalty, and we are so blessed to have you guys here. If anyone doesn't know, you worked with Don Cornelius and started Soul Train, which is a phenomenal. I watched that as a kid growing up, so I cannot even tell you how geeked I am, how excited I am to have you here. And then along with that, you being the first Black salesperson at Columbia Records. And also just, your book, The Anatomy of a Record Company. It's just so much that you have done for the record industry. So what we want to know, we want to start off with you. Can you just tell us about what that was like back then, breaking into the music industry as a young Black man?
Well, if I... Go ahead.
Oh, you can answer.
No, if I said it, if I heard you correctly, if I heard your questions correctly, which wasn't too clear, but if I'm thinking of what you said, what I would add is that my entire 50 or plus years in the music industry has just been pleasurable. I mean, the artists that I have worked with, they were all great. And even the different individuals, the male and female record executives, the writers, it's just been a pleasurable experience. And there was not one day that I regretted going to work. Every day was fun and pleasurable. And it's some of the things that I tried to elaborate in my book. And the idea was to share my experiences with those that come after me, and hopefully it will give them a little bit of a head start, because it is a fun industry and it can be a very, very lucrative industry.
Nice. And then what advice do you have, for someone trying to get into the industry? Because now things are a lot different, right? Back then, we didn't have things like social media. There's a lot more independent
He's
artists.
seen it all. He's seen the industry go through all the changes.
Right. So what advice do you have for someone now getting into the industry?
Well, I would say the most important thing is commitment. Be committed to the artists that you're working with, and also familiarize yourself with the product. So you thoroughly know the product and you're committed to the artist. And then you'll do a bang up job. You can't lose.
Yeah. Wow. And then you've seen, you started with like groups like the Jackson 5, right? Those that you watch them from infancy grow into what they became, and then Michael Jackson growing into what he became. What, because you had you saw that firsthand. What was that like for you?
Okay, I understand that question now. It was fun. It was pleasurable. As a matter of fact, the first time that I worked with them was when we went on that tour to Senegal. It was their first African trip, and they were just your youngsters there then, playful kind of youngsters. And if you notice, I think in one of my books, I have some of the pictures that we took when we were there in Senegal, sitting on the railings, and also with some of the top disc jockeys that were in the country at the time, such as Frankie Crocker, who accompanied us on that trip. And, it was just us, here, these kids, playful. We were staying at the same hotel, and all the tours and things we did around the city. We were all together in the same van, and it was just fun. And of course, they were just kids then. Michael in particular, playful, very, very mischievous. but it was a pleasurable experience. Matter of fact, a lifelong lasting experience. And their father was there with them, you know, and of course, as the matriarch and the person there in charge. But, you know, these boys, the Jackson, they were kids, and they're just playful, even on stage and off stage. And especially in the hotel, all over the hotel, in the lobby. We were staying in a hotel called the Teranga Hotel, which was the finest hotel in Dakar, Senegal at that particular time. They were all over the lobby and the dining hall. It was just a fun and a pleasurable time. And even on the trip on the airplane going over, you know, they were leaving from New York, crossing the Atlantic, actually the Atlantic Ocean, and landing there at first thing the next morning in Senegal. And the entourage that was there to meet us, really to meet them. I was accompanying them. So there to meet them. And it was just a fun time to be caught up in the excitement that the people that they drew, you know, the country just loved them. And they were lovable. No question about that.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think I was very young. The Jackson 5, I was like a babe, like really young but I remember seeing them as a kid. And then Michael Jackson had to be one of my favorite artists growing up. There's been of course, like anything, there's been such an evolution in music and the sound of music and the direction of music, and it's so different today. How do you feel about the direction that music is going in today?
Well, one thing that I am really, really happy about now is like Kendrick Lamar, for instance, and what he's writing about and making us aware of what's happening in the world. And I certainly appreciate that, because at one time I was really perturbed and disturbed in the direction that the country and the music was going in terms of the early rappers, the gangster rap and all of that, which in my opinion was not good for the country. It was not even good for our youngsters, because our youngsters are listening to that music. But the direction that the industry is going in now, I think is a very, very good and a positive direction. And I'm elated that it's going in that direction, because the youngsters are listening to what's being said. They're emulating. And I think it should be positive, because they need all of the role models that they can possibly get. So I think it's going, it had a turnaround, and I think it's going in a very, very good direction now.
Yeah.
With that said, do you have any advice for any new and upcoming people trying to come into the industry, whether they're trying to be published, artists, or anything?
Well, if there's some of you that's just entering the business and just been in it for a short time, just love what you're doing, because it is a lovable business. It's a fun business. And just imagine waking up every day going to work, and it's fun. And that's really that's really what it's all about. And if you approach it that way, it's not a chore. It's not a chore. It's enjoyable. And that's what it's been with me from my experience. And even the young people that have worked with me through the years, they have approached it the same way. And also, by all means, when you're making that money, put it aside to prepare for later years. One of the things that I did years ago when at CBS, when I was putting my crew or that original 13 together, these were young black men that was really the first time in coming into a major company where they were getting a set salary with benefits and things such as that. And one of the things that I emphasized to them at the very, very beginning, and all of them were young newlyweds. One thing that I emphasized to them, buy you a home. And now here we are, 50 years later, and of that original 13, I guess maybe there are about 5 that's still alive. And they took that advice, and they bought those homes. That was the beginning. That was the very beginning. And I hear from them so often, and they tell me about that advice that I gave them and how happy they are that they were and following that, because now you see the value of it. You know, in this business, the money is good. It comes fast, but it doesn't last. So you got to be very, very careful on your investments and put some money aside So when you get around, well, much earlier than me because I'm up in my 80s now, but when you're on your 60s and your 70s, you put something aside. So you're not worried about how you're going to pay your bills. And it's just a pleasure to me when I talk to these guys and ladies. And they took that advice, and now they're not necessarily on the easy street, but they don't have those worries about where am I going to stay. Because years ago, they took that advice. They put some money aside, they bought those homes, and now there's no worry about where I'm going to stay. So that's very, very important. So keep that in mind. While the money's coming fast and big, put some aside, make some investments.
Yes, yes. And I love how you impress upon others your knowledge. With that being said, you do have a book called The Anatomy of a Record Company, which you also had you taught a course at California State University as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that, the book and the course, and how that came about?
The very first book that I wrote, I was teaching a course out at California State University, and the course is called The Anatomy of a Record Company. And basically, I was teaching that class, but there were no textbooks or anything. So the students in that class, they suggested to me, Dr. Westbrooks, Professor West at the time, why don't you write a book and we'll use it as a textbook? So that first book that I wrote really was a syllabus of the class that I taught. It was called The Anatomy of a Record Company. And I tried to write it in layman's terms so that a person with just no knowledge of the record industry at all could pick that book up and could go through it. And it's somewhat of a blueprint as to how one could enter the record business and function in it. That was the very first book. And the second book that I wrote, what I did, I took the top executives in the industry in the various areas, whether it was a producer or public relations, writer, and I interviewed each one of them, and each one put a chapter in that book. So the idea, if you want to be a songwriter, in the songwriter's words, that's successful. This is what they're suggesting. So in that book, there were about 15 to 20 different top individuals at that time in their field that devoted a chapter to that book. So that's really what that came about. And of course, my latest book, Power 101, and it's about the Harvard Report. And the very first year that I was at CBS years ago, there was oversaw a survey that was conducted by the students there at Harvard School of Business. And basically the idea was, how can CBS enter and penetrate the black music business? That was their assignment. And I worked along with those students and in guiding them. And that book incorporates quite a bit of that information from that study. And one may wonder what's happening in the music industry here today, or the direction that the music industry went in the 70s is the result of the study that was done there at Harvard, and that was in 1972. So that was many, many, many years ago. Yeah. But that book tells you, let's say a student or a scholar that's studying about the music industry, they can pick up that book and get some idea of the way things started out and the results of it. Matter of fact, it led to CBS becoming the dominant force in black music, where within the 2 to 3 years, they had more than 150 black artists on their label. They dominated the industry. They won all of the awards. And there's a hit after hit after hit. So that my latest book, it talks about all of that.
Nice. That's amazing. I don't think people read as much anymore, and I think they should, especially when you're getting into an industry. You should be reading about that industry, and it's so phenomenal that you have something that someone can pick up and actually read about what happened, so they can learn from the past. I don't think that a lot of people realize how important that is. And you mentioned CBS. Because you were brought onto CBS by Clive Davis. Is that correct?
I was working for Mercury Records in Chicago, and I received a call. Matter of fact, I was in the national promotion director for Mercury Records in Chicago. And artists like Jerry Butler, Gene Chandler, Simtek and Wiley, Earl Garner. I mean, it was those kinds of artists, and they had an awesome catalog at Mercury Records. But anyway, I was working for Mercury Records in Chicago. I'd only been at Mercury less than a year, and I received a call from Clive Davis in New York. And of course, at that particular time, you receive a call from Clive Davis, you stop everything and take a listen. So I flew into New York because I was based in Chicago for Mercury. I flew into New York, and I met with Clive Davis and a guy named Bruce Lundvall, who was the national director of marketing for CBS. And he was the vice president of marketing for CBS, of all of the Columbia labels. And I sat down with them, and they were telling me that they were interested in really entering the black music business on a major way. And I became convinced that they were serious about what they were doing. So I went back to Mercury Records in Chicago. I resigned from Mercury. And in November of 1971, I started working for CBS in New York City. And the first thing that I did, I put together a national staff of promotion managers. Now, prior to that, I had worked as a salesman in Chicago, Illinois for several years. So I knew retail. I knew black one-stops. I knew how, as a salesman for Capitol Records in Chicago, the bulk of my accounts were black accounts. But to complete a territory, I had to have some white accounts as well, or top 40 accounts. But in the meantime, I knew black radio from my experiences there in Chicago as being a salesman, because I had to tie that in to get those records sold at those retail outlets. Mm-hmm. So in putting my staff together, I knew the importance of that promotion manager. I knew the importance of a program director at each major radio stations. So what I did, let's take Philadelphia, for instance. There was a guy named Georgia Woods, who was the program director there in Philadelphia. And I went to Georgia Woods and I told him that I am going to hire a local promotion manager for this market. Who would you suggest? And he gave him a suggestion, and my thinking was, if the program director suggests an individual, when that individual comes in with the record we were working, he's going to play that record. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it happened. And I did the same thing in Chicago. I did the same thing in New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Atlanta, all over the country. So I had those local promotion managers in all of the major markets. And on a local basis, I also put in a regional promotion manager, and that local guy reported to the regional guy. As an example, there was a guy named Granville White, who was my regional promotion manager for the Midwest. And the young guy that was in Chicago reported to him. A guy named Jerry Griffith reported to him. Also, the young guy in Detroit, the local promotion manager, Bill Craig, reported to him. Had a young guy in Cleveland, Glenn Wright, who reported to Granville White. So in each area, I had a regional promotion manager, and the local promotion manager reported to them, and the regional promotion manager in turn reported directly to me. So that's the way it was set up. And then after I had everybody in place, the next thing was to make sure that we start getting the product. And the very first product we had that was ready to go, I produced a show in Mount Morris Park in New York City. I think it's called Malcolm X Park, and now they renamed it. And I brought in all the acts on the label, Philadelphia International in particular, and the artists that we were going to release their product. Also, CBS had a very, very vast jazz label of artists. So I had a big band there in the park, and they played behind all of those acts. And then after that was done, and incidentally, the kids just went wild. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And then we went back to the offices, started releasing those records. And the very first record we released was on a group called the OJs, a tune called Backstabbers.
I know
And
that
immediately that we secured play all over the country because I had those guys in place. Gold immediately. And then behind that came another group called Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes.
Heard of them?
Love Our Lord. Gold. Platinum.
Wow.
And then behind that came Billy Paul. Me and Mrs. Jones. Gold. Platinum. And it was just hit after hit.
All the classics.
Hit. And that was the beginning of it. And then I was in that position, let me see, for about 2 years, I believe. And then I transferred over and started working in the international division, CBS International. A guy named Walter Yetnikoff, who was the president of CBS International at that particular time. And it was interesting the way that came about, because the promoter that took the Jackson 5 to Senegal was a good friend of mine. And he just allowed me to go along on that trip. So I assisted him on the promotion side from my knowledge. And my wife and I, we went on that trip with him to the Jackson 5, as well as the other people. Like it's all told, other than the Jackson 5, there were maybe about 20 people, entourage, that he took from the States. But as a result of that trip was the catalyst for me transferring over into the international division. Well, what happened in planning for that trip for Senegal, I went to Walter Yetnikoff, who was president of International, and I asked him, did CBS have any interest in anything going on in Senegal? He said, no. Why don't you check it out while you were there? So after the Jackson 5 had completed that tour in Senegal, I stayed over an extra week in Senegal, Dakar. And I did a little survey of what was happening on the music scene there in Senegal. And when I went back to New York, I made my presentation to Walter Yetnikoff. And then he suggested, why don't you transfer over from CBS Domestic into CBS International? And of course, that was altogether a completely different world. In the international division, all of my comrades, or the people working along with me, they all spoke several languages. They were well-traveled on an international basis. It was just a different world. So immediately I transferred over into the CBS International, and the rest was just history from there. And of course, that led me to eventually meeting Fela. I worked with Fela there in Nigeria. I was just all over the place. Central Africa, Zaire, East Africa, Kenya. Interesting thing about Kenya, when I was studying the music scene in Kenya, I was surprised of the interest in country and Western music in Kenya. And I'm trying to understand that, but then as I got into it, Kenya was colonized by the English. And EMI is an English company. So naturally, they flooded the country, Kenya, with country and Western music from their label. So this is all they heard in Kenya was country and Western music. And they just fell in love with it. Then I got to thinking back, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. And before WDIA, or those other black stations there in Memphis, that was those country and Western stations. So if ever I listened to radio as a kid, this is what I heard, country and Western artists. And as I thought back, I'm a lover of country and Western music also. So I was indoctrinated as well. So I thought that was rather interesting. But anyway, that was the beginning of it. Now, one thing that I would suggest, you can Google me, LoganWestbrooks.com, And it's a few little things online there about me and my career and some of the people that I work with and some of the things that I did. And also, you can go to Logan Westbrooks Collection, University of Indiana. And all of my papers from my record label, Source Records, some of the examples of contracts and things such as that, some of my marketing plans, they're all there. That's deposited at the University of Indiana. And they're online. You can go through it, and if there's anything you'd like a copy of, would like to see, you can contact them, and it's there. It's available for scholars all over the world. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, that history is priceless. My mind is blown right now, sitting here listening to this. You probably, I know you are a wealth of knowledge. So anyone wanting to know anything about the music industry, I mean, you're like busting with knowledge. It's so crazy, and we appreciate you. And I mean, I just again feel honored to be here with you today.
Okay, well, I certainly appreciate and it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to meeting you. And maybe one of these days, I'll meet you face to face.
Yes.
We have
my
to.
Gosh. I would love that.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Blazing 420 Radio.